Welcome back to Woke Nation. I know this is like a day late. I think it's the 25th now. Episode, I think 54. I was originally going to do an episode on actually, and I'll talk about it real quick before I get to the main topic, because the main topic is a little, it's the kind of thing that nobody really likes to talk about. But anyway, real quick, I wanted to go over. I've been talking about abortion lately, and there was a real disturbing story that came out of the UK where a UK judge had actually ordered a mentally disabled woman to have an abortion. And I don't think the actual name of the woman is known. The story's gone viral. A lot of people are talking about it, but I just wanted to make note of it. Apparently, there was an update on the story where I don't know exactly how the UK's system of law, their court system is set up, but apparently this judge's ruling has been put on hold temporarily, and while they investigate further what actually is going on there. But basically, this woman who has unfortunately, the mental capacity of like a grade schooler had gotten pregnant and for some reason, I don't know again the full story, but she had been brought before a judge. The authorities had been made aware of the fact that this mentally disabled woman was pregnant, and they had said that a judge ruled that she must have an abortion. She ordered her to, and the judge actually admitted in a statement that her ruling was incredibly intrusive. And that it really she realized like that this is violating this woman's personal freedom. Now the mentally disabled woman's mother has stepped forward and said that she would take care of the child. That meant nothing to the judge. The judge, in some of her statements, and I don't have them here in front of me, you're welcome to go look them up to make sure that I'm treating this fairly. The judge actually went on to say in some of her statements that she had the authority to decide what is right, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, for this mentally disabled woman, that she had the right to decide this. That this woman, because of her mental disability, didn't have the right to choose whether she could have the child or not. Keep in mind that this mentally disabled woman wanted to have the child. She doesn't want to have an abortion. And her mother, who would be the grandmother of this child, the mentally disabled woman is 22 weeks pregnant, I believe. Now, her mother, the grandmother, has also said, no, let's not have an abortion. I will take care of the child. A social worker also, who is familiar with the family, has said, no, an abortion would not be a good thing here. Let's just put the child up for adoption or have the grandmother take care of the child. The judge has ignored all of these people and said that she knows what's best for this disabled woman. The sheer irony here is just dumbfounding. I thought what was paramount was a woman's right to choose, and yet here we have a judge trampling on that very thing, and saying that she knows what's best for this woman's body. Now, you won't hear me making those arguments because I think a child is its own body and is a separate entity and person and human being. But this just goes to show the logical inconsistencies of the pro-choice movement, how this whole issue of abortion has become a kind of holy sacrament to them, like this sacred thing that cannot be challenged under any circumstances, and the very doctrines that uphold it, freedom to choose, you can see now are totally arbitrary. They have these people that are obsessed, that are activists, that are obsessed with abortion, they seem to derive some sort of unholy pleasure from it. This woman was given and I mean the judge was given every reason to rule in favor of adoption. You have the grandmother who is willing to take care of the child. You have the social worker who is familiar with the family who said, no, let's not have an abortion. This grandmother is more than capable of taking care of the child. Let her do it. And then you have the actual mother of the child herself. Never mind that this mother is mentally disabled, she's still a human being who has rights and the right to choose. I thought she's a woman, this is her body. And yet the judge is saying that she doesn't have that right, that the judge has the right to choose what happens to her body for her. I mean, this just tears to shreds the whole abortion uh, industry's argument. Also, the the whole idea here too is extremely condescending from the judge, because the judge actually, what she said was that this disabled woman doesn't really understand what it means to have a child, and that she wants a child in the same sense that she would want a doll or a toy or something like that. You can't get more degrading and condescending than talking to somebody like that. And it's actually sickening to think that she can get away with talking about somebody like that while at the same time simultaneously taking away her freedom to choose, which I thought, again, was paramount. So we'll actually see where this case goes. But I think the fact that this is happening in the UK, where they have an increasingly socialist healthcare system. This is what you get from a socialist universal healthcare system, where the government runs the healthcare system. When the government is paying for your entire healthcare system, should it be any surprise to you that they decide to take the reins and tell you what you can or cannot do with your body, how they're going to treat your illnesses? We're beginning to see how this looks when the rubber meets the road in practice with this case here. How a judge is now deciding for the government whether to take on an additional burden to society, which this child potentially would be if it went into the adoption system, the child care system, the orphan system, orphanages, what have you, whatever you want to call it. Is it possible that she's looking at this from the point of view that she wants to lessen a financial burden on society? I think that's quite likely, and it wouldn't be surprising either in a society that is increasingly trivializing life, emphasizing death, and taking a very perverse pleasure in killing. It seems to me they want to kill all the wrong people. They have no problem killing children or people, like in I think it's Norway, where there are almost no children born anymore with Down syndrome or mental disabilities, because they abort them as soon as they find out whether they have these issues. So they're killing off all the people they deem desirable or undesirable. But then when it comes to an actual murderer on death row, then they get their signs out and start picketing for life. I mean, give me a freaking break. Um, as I said, I want to follow this and see what actually transpires as far as the story is concerned. Um, they apparently have put this judge's ruling on hold. Thank God for that. And we'll see what actually happens. But I'm not holding my breath. I mean, especially in the UK, they're further along ahead of us as far as the devaluing of life, secularization, and socialization as well of their healthcare system and of their government in general. So I'm not going to hold my breath and hope that this turns out right. We remember numerous stories of parents who wanted to take their children out of the UK healthcare system and have them treated in healthcare systems in other countries like Italy or the United States, because the UK healthcare system refused to treat their children. They said that, well, your child has a very narrow percentage-wise, has a very narrow chance of survival, so we're not going to treat him or her. We're just going to let them die. This has happened numerous times, and so the parents have tried to assert their right as the parent of the child, and take the child out of the hospital system in the UK and bring them over to, I think Italy offered in one specific example, bring them over to the United States, basically take them anywhere to a healthcare system that would treat the child, that wasn't socialized like the UK, that determines whether they actually want to, they do a cost benefit analysis on whether they want to treat a child for a life threatening illness. And in the one case that I remember off the top of my head, I can't remember the child's name, but this was just maybe a year ago. The child died because the government ruled that the parents were not allowed to take the child out of the hospital and take I believe it was a young boy, take him to a country where they would treat him. Instead, they said that legally they were they were basically stripping the parents of their rights as the guardians of the child, and the state, the government, the UK usurped that power and said that the child should just die, and that's exactly what happened. Anyone who thinks that life is valued in the UK right now is fooling themselves, and this is going to get worse. Euthanasia is right down the road. Europe is starting to embrace this whole idea of euthanasia. As I said before, they're getting rid of anyone they deemed undesirable. This is the same thing the Nazis did. I mean, yeah, is our memory, is our ability to think back that bad that we can't remember less than a century ago where the Nazis did the exact same thing? I wish I could remember the name of the program, but the Nazis had a specific program where they killed children that were mentally unfit or were deemed a burden on society. The elderly were also killed. It was T something or another. I can't remember the name of the program. Glenn Beck references it quite often, if I remember correctly. But I mean, our memory span is so warped and so focused on the present, and we have this very stupid idea right now in the West that we've arrived at some kind of plateau of social goodness, and that these ills that we saw in governments in the past, like the Nazis or the Soviets with their Soviet man, as Joseph Stalin killed 15 million of his own people, we think these things are in the past, and won't happen now. We won't recommit those sins because we've arrived at some plateau of moral goodness, some utilitarian nonsense, altruism gone berserk, the word stripped of all meaning because we don't have an objective reference for it anymore. It's some scary stuff, and these things are progressing. Now you see little cracks in the walls, with Brexit, and well, that's more the globalist thing, but anything that challenges the state or the global power system, I'm going to be all for. That's why I'm all for Brexit. I cheer Viktor Orban in Hungary, or Matteo Salvini in Italy, or any of these people, or Donald Trump, or Marine Le Pen in France. These people that are dedicated to bringing the EU down to its knees. You don't need that. The EU wants to have a healthcare system all to itself, so that there are no individual, like the UK healthcare system, or the Italian healthcare system. They want to strip these countries of their healthcare systems and just have the EU healthcare system. Which would, of course, just totally ruin the sovereignty of any of these nations, which is the main goal, the end goal. The second thing that I was going to talk about is more just that I wanted people to actually take some time out of their day and look up Project Veritas. Project Veritas is one of the very few investigative journalist outfits out there today. There are very few people or journalists today that do true investigative work, that don't have a subjective or biased mission, but rather just want to obtain truth and reveal it to the people. Project Veritas does this, and I would also argue WikiLeaks does the very same thing, although they don't typically, well, yeah, I would put WikiLeaks in the same thing. And I made a video not too long ago about Julian Assange and how I feel about him. I have a little bit of a mixed opinion about Assange, but I think ultimately the things that WikiLeaks does in this specific time that we're in right now, in this globalist versus nationalist war that we're in right now in the West, I think that outfits like WikiLeaks are crucial and should be kept up and running. In a perfect world, or in a world that's as close to perfect as possible, like you could say, like when this country was founded, back when government was limited, I would think that something like WikiLeaks would probably not be a good thing, because they publish just about anything that comes into their hands, state secret or no. And I think the driving force, undeniably, behind WikiLeaks is a very anarchic model, and that, I think their ideology is anarchy, and so in that I don't support them, but I do support them in the fact that they release secrets of governments that are untrustworthy at this point and are working to take away our freedom. So I would very much encourage people to release information that is damaging to any government at this point, not to bring it to its knees, but to I would say to oust and destroy the power of the people that are in it right now. I would say that for the West on the whole right now. It all needs to be thrown out and start over, just start over at this point. And I did a podcast recently on civil disobedience. My thoughts on that. I'd love to hear anyone else's thoughts on that. But these Project Veritas videos, uh, recently, what they've been doing is releasing. They've had whistleblowers come to them from Google, and they've been releasing undercover videos from Google as well. And what these videos are uncovering are some very high-level people within the Google machine, within the mechanisms of the Google machine, that are admitting openly that their game plan is to make sure that somebody like President Trump never becomes president again. They said that they're working very hard to ensure that 2016 is not repeated again in 2020. And they made reference to people like Elizabeth Warren, who they are big fans. This one particular higher up at Google is a big fan of Elizabeth Warren, but she said no, Elizabeth Warren is misguided because she wants to break Google up. And she said she doesn't understand. Google, because it is such a large monopoly company and has massive resources and funding, can actually work to prevent fair elections, and can work to censor conservatives. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what she was saying. And she was saying that if Google were to be broken up, individual small companies could not take care of preventing somebody like Trump coming into office again in the same way that a massive monopoly like Google can. This is scary because that's the very reason we should break Google up, is because it has become so incredibly powerful that it can influence elections. And that's what it's working to do. These people are admitting it openly. Whistleblowers are coming out of Google and coming to Project Veritas and admitting openly with documented evidence that this is what Google's doing. They're working intentionally to do everything they can to censor conservatives and make sure somebody like Donald Trump does not make it into office again in 2020. One of the documents showed that since Google owns YouTube, if I were to search for, say, Dave Rubin, I think was the specific example, which is kind of funny because Dave Rubin actually isn't really a conservative per se. He's a classical liberal in that he enjoys he promotes free speech, and he has a lot of conversations on his YouTube and podcast show with conservatives. But Dave Rubin's beliefs are not actually conservative. He's a homosexual, which doesn't mean really whether you're liberal or conservative anymore. But he's pro-abortion, grudgingly though he says. But he's pro-choice. He's homosexual. There's other things. He's an atheist. So there's a lot of stuff that he believes that is not typically conservative. I wouldn't classify him as a conservative, and I don't think he would classify himself as one. He's a classical liberal. But if you search for Dave Rubin on YouTube, usually when you search for somebody, on the right-hand side of the page, you'll get a whole list of people that are like him. That they try to encourage you to go watch as well. Well, they've admitted that if you search for somebody like Dave Rubin or Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson, rather than have other conservative names listed in the right-hand side of the search bar to follow up on, they'll intentionally put liberal names in there to kind of dissuade you or stop, even though this sounds pedantic and small. Even these little things are effective at drowning out and minimalizing the voice of conservatives, so that when you look in that right hand taskbar search bar, you'll see CNN or MSNBC or something like that rather than a conservative name. Um, and it, you last week I talked about what was going on with Steven Crowder. This is another example. This had nothing to do with Project Veritas, but the the battle that Steven Crowder was having with not only YouTube but also a journalist from Vice, who was using his influence and the influence of other big names in the liberal media conglomeration to put pressure on YouTube to silence Steven Crowder just because they don't like the things he's saying. And Steven Crowder is also an enormously popular name on YouTube. He has almost 4 million subscribers, and we're leading into the 2020 election. And we now have evidence directly from the horse's mouth that Google is doing everything they can to silence big names like Steven Crowder leading up into the election. This is not surprising. Facebook's doing the exact same thing. I mean, they've removed big names like Alex Jones, Laura Loomer, Milo Yiannopoulos, Gavin McInnes, Owen Benjamin. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And that's not even counting the people that are still on there but have their pages just blocked or shadow banned, or they get strikes against them for no reason at all, and they're taken down for 30 days. Then they're allowed back up. James Woods was a huge name, the actor, very popular conservative figure on Twitter. He's now gone because of all the censorship. I think he quit it voluntarily, but he had been banned and brought back and banned and brought back. Jesse O'Kelly is another one. The list goes on and on and on and on of names that have been either censored or banned or shadow banned or taken off and brought back. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And all this leading into the 2020 election because they're well aware of the fact that in 2016 they overlooked social media, and conservatives really used social media to get Donald Trump elected. Milo Yiannopoulos was huge then. Lots of people listened to him, and he had a lot of younger potential voters that were following him and really soaking in his message. He was going around to college campuses. I like Milo. I still listen and pay attention to him, although he's really hard to hear what he's saying anymore because they've now banned him from Facebook, from Instagram, from Twitter. The only thing he has left is his YouTube channel, and you know darn well that ain't going to last much longer at all. So, I mean, this is scary, scary stuff that we're moving into. And all the while, all these companies are bitterly or vehemently denying the fact that they're doing any censoring at all. It's just shocking. It's mind-boggling. It really is that they can get away with doing this. They stand in this unique position of immunity from government oversight because they claim to be platforms that are open to all views. And while they claim that, they are very openly censoring behind the scenes and obviously censoring conservative voices. And Christians, too, especially Christians. They despise Christians. They absolutely cannot stand them because Christians are the antithesis of, or the prime example of somebody who stands in the way of the progressive mindset, the progressive viewpoint, the progressive march. Um, uh, Everything that a Christian stands for is totally opposed to the progressive movement. I'll take myself as an example, the transsexual movement. I will claim that science and biology bear out that there are only two genders. This is reality. Please show me one competent biologist who will say there are more than two genders. There isn't one that I'm aware of. And even if there was, I would say he lost his mind because there are two genders. Gender is not fluid. It is not malleable. It does not change. You are born what you are. That is it. It does not change. You cannot change it. Changing your outside appearance does not change anything whatsoever as far as who you are biologically, your DNA. I'm sorry, it doesn't change it. It's a fact. There are men, there are women. That's it. End of story. And you cannot change that. Um, abortion, I'm pro-life. Life begins at conception. All of science bears this out. Besides the fact that the Bible does too. It talks about God knitting us together in our mother's womb. From your innermost parts, I knew you. Um, so the only thing that I think that maybe the progressives and me might agree on is foreign policy as far as war goes. With that was the third thing I was going to talk about here. This episode's kind of a mishmash, and I'm going to end it fairly soon here. But I just wanted to get something out there for you all. This war with Iran that we're seem to be marching pretty quickly into. And that's the really scary thing to me. Donald Trump just sat down and had an interview not too long ago. I forget who it was with, where he openly acknowledged that a lot of the people in his cabinet that are advising him are either doves or hawks. Now, hawks, obviously being people that are more warmongers and want to rush into every kind of war that they can possibly get themselves into. He openly admitted that John Bolton would take on the entire world simultaneously right now if he could. That's a scary thing that somebody like that has so much influence right now in the decisions that are made over whether we invade a country or not. Um, Mike Pompeo, I've heard conflicting things over what he actually believes, whether he wants to stay out of wars or whether he thinks that we should be involved more in the Middle East. I'm a Christian, but you cannot discount the some of these men. I've heard it time and time again that some of these men, like Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, these neocon conservatives, have a very suspect eschatological view of the end times that the Bible talks about in Revelation, where now that Israel is a nation, and now that Donald Trump has put the United States Embassy in Jerusalem, and they believe that these are key events in the Book of Revelation, and they don't look at the apocalypse as something to avoid, but rather they want to hasten it. This is foolishness. Now, whether we're in the end times or not, I have no idea. There are things that go on today that make me wonder whether we are or we aren't. We can talk about that later, but that's irrelevant. It clearly says that none of us know the day or the hour. That Christ Himself says that He'll come like a thief in the night. So we're not supposed to know, and I don't think we're supposed to speculate. We're supposed to live as if He could return right now. Which how many of us actually do that? When we're in the middle of sin or something like that, or we're making excuses for a sin. I'm just as guilty of it as anybody else. I admit this. That's why grace is so important and repentance. But we're supposed to live as if He could return any minute, not openly plan for the apocalypse, not try to hasten the day where our wild imagination has conceived that Revelation is talking about. Now here we are in the end times in Revelation, so let's hasten the day. That's not our job. The day will come whether we try to hasten it or not. And fools, if these people are really trying to do that, then I think they're fools. And I think they're dangerous fools. It is scary that people like John Bolton, if he really is the type of guy that Trump is talking about, who just wants to take on the world, and really does have these, like I've heard from multiple different sources, him and Mike Pompeo have these like eschatological views that like now that the embassy is in Jerusalem and Israel's a nation, that we're really approaching this kind of biblical end times period that's talked about in Revelation, and they're working towards that, trying to draw world events towards that point of Armageddon. If they're really thinking along those lines, then these men need to be confined to a mental asylum, and they have no business in government. That's for darn sure. But Tucker Carlson is very good on this. These mind-numbing wars that are always, why are we in the Middle East? What the hell are we doing in the Middle East? I'm dead serious. Like, why are we there? Why are we still in Iraq? We're not opening a democratic form of government in Iraq. The people don't want it. Most of the people there don't want us there. We are so opposite from them in our worldview, in the way we view life and how we live life. It's like night and day. They are not interested in the United States opinion on how they should live. Okay, these people do not want us there. Why are we there? Why are we in Afghanistan too? What business do we have still in Afghanistan? Supposedly Osama bin Laden is dead. Saddam Hussein is dead. Al Qaeda, we don't even hear about Al Qaeda anymore, really. And ISIS has been driven into the depths of recent into the depths of Hades itself, supposedly by Trump. He destroyed ISIS. So why are we still there? And now why are we flying $125 million freaking drones over Iran? If Iran was flying a drone over our airspace, we would shoot it down too. Let's get rid of this ridiculous idea that just because we're America, we can go do things in other countries' territory. Even if that was, I think somebody said it was international waters. We're still approaching Iranian territory. The fact that we're flying drones over there and collecting data and information would be considered a threat by any country for any reason whatsoever. Again, if Iran was flying a drone across the Gulf of Mexico, even if it was international waters, all of us would be like, what is that and what is it doing here and why does Iran have that remotely near our country? And we would shoot the dang thing down. We would. Okay? So just because we're the United States doesn't mean we have any right to go flying drones over Iran or collecting any more data about Iran. We got out of the nuclear deal. Make sure they don't have nukes. You don't need to fly a $200 million drone over Iran to find out whether they have nukes, okay? This is just absurd. The thing deserved to be shot down. Whoever was flying it was an idiot, okay? And the idea that we should now go to war because of an unmanned drone, Ben Shapiro was talking about this, that, we should, basically saying that we had every right to now start launching missiles at Iran as a show of force because they shot down a stinking drone. There was nobody manning the drone, okay? It was $125 million. Donald Trump flushes that down the toilet every morning when he gets up. And so did Barack Obama, too. And so did George Bush, okay? Before you start crying about $125 million, remember that we are $25 trillion in debt and counting. Cry about that first and then whine to me about a drone, okay? And this ridiculous idea that we should start launching missiles or something to show our strength. Iran knows our strength. Everybody around the world knows our strength. Everybody knows that we have the best economy and the best military in the world. There is not a single country, North Korea included, who does not know that if they launch a missile on us, that we could make their entire everything within their borders a crater. They all know that. Kim Jong-un knows that. The Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran knows that. The people of Iraq know that from experience, I might add. And the same goes for Afghanistan. There is nobody in this world that is in mystery over whether fighting us will be the demise of their country or not. Even China outnumbers us as far as people are concerned, yet they're well aware that our technological capabilities would reduce that billion that they have over there. We would have it in a single day. They would lose 500 million people by the time the sun had set just because of our military firepower. Okay? And Trump has rebuilt the military. There is no reason, I would say, to people like Ben Shapiro. I mean, Paul Joseph Watson replied to him right away, and he said, "How can you call yourself pro-life and then advocate murdering people over a drone, an unmanned drone. And he's right. If you really consider yourself pro-life, then it's not just the children in the womb, it's all people. And there is no reason to go murdering civilians because a stinking drone got shot down. And we should not be considering war over a drone, okay? Don't fly drones over Iran. We don't have any business in their borders, just the way they don't have any business in ours. We don't want their drones flying over the Gulf of Mexico or near the tip of Florida or over the Virgin Islands. You know that as well as I do. If they did it to us, we would shoot the drone down. So let's not be hypocrites here. And let's not start a war over some self-righteous hypocrisy. We always seem to do this. We can meddle around in elections the world over. We do it all the time. We killed Mugabe. We meddle in Russian elections, Chinese elections. We meddle in every single election that happens around the world, but then one country meddles even a tiny bit in our election, and it's this world-ending catastrophe. How dare they? How dare the Russians try to put information on social media? Never mind that it was completely useless and accomplished absolutely nothing towards Donald Trump's election. People voted for him because they wanted to vote for him, and because Hillary Rodham Clinton was the worst candidate in the history of politics, not because of the Russians. We meddle in every single election that takes place around this world. We are the world's policemen. We are the supreme meddler. And then when somebody meddles with us, it's the end of the world where all our nukes come out and we're ready to start World War III. This is ridiculous. Whatever happened to the biblical values of doing unto others as you would have them do unto us? Ron Paul was right. His foreign policy was non-interventionist, and the longer time goes on, the more convinced I am that he was right. We should pull all of our troops back, get them out of Korea, get them out of Iraq, get them out of Syria, all these other places. If Assad wants to firebomb his own country until it's a desolate wasteland, so be it. That's not our business. Now, I'm not saying really that we should just let him massacre his own people, but it doesn't have to be us that goes in there. There are countries that border Syria that are our allies. Whatever happened to Saudi Arabia, I don't know if they border them, but they are our ally and they're in the region. Why can't they stop it? Why can't they send troops in to Syria to stop Assad? Why is it always us? Why is it always our people? This mantra that we're fighting for freedom. Whose freedom are we fighting for? We're fighting for the freedom of people that don't want freedom. We're introducing democracy at the end of a gun barrel. It doesn't work like that. The very concept of democracy collapses when you introduce it by force, because it's by necessity, by definition, a government form that is free, not force-driven. Okay, and we're trying to introduce it by force in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, and potentially Iran and North. If John Bolton and people like that had their way, we'd be in North Korea as well. This is madness. No more wars. Get all the troops back home and forget about this intervening crap that's just. I can't even think about it. It just drives me absolutely insane. But those were the three major things I wanted to talk about. The madness in Iran, the UK judge that ordered that woman to have an abortion, and there was one other one that we talked about that I cannot remember right now because I've been rambling. But next week I'm going to have a little more detailed of an episode. We're going to be talking about something that makes everybody uncomfortable. I was going to talk about it today, but we kind of got off on a tangent on other things. So next week we're going to talk about pornography and how what an evil addiction pornography is, and really go through the ways that it's just absolutely destroying society from the top to the bottom. It's ruining marriages, ruining people's moral selves, the relationship between men and women, how women view men, how men view women. All kinds of things are absolutely destroyed by pornography. And we're going to go into it because I've struggled with it, and if anybody else is honest, I think they would have to admit they have too, because you cannot get away from it. It is absolutely everywhere. I use Juno email. I know nobody uses Juno anymore, but all I do is turn on Juno email, and right there on the screen is just a half naked lady. And all I'm trying to do is check my email. I didn't type in like bikini models or anything in Google. I didn't type in anything like that. It's just right there on Juno. You can't avoid it. It's just absolutely everywhere. Where we are a pornography soaked culture at this point, and it's absolutely damning us to hell, especially the young kids. Again, with the children, think of what this is doing to developing minds and children with their perceptions of, especially a teenager who's just in the beginning of understanding the differences between men and women, with all his hormones going absolutely insane, and then you introduce something like that, an evil like that. It could be absolutely crippling to his development, morally, spiritually, physically, sexually, everything. And we're going to get into that next week. And it might be a more than one episode series because it's so wide ranging in its effect, and it deserves to be taken on in its complexity and in its fullness. And again, this is not me pointing the finger at anybody except right here at myself too. I've struggled with it. I admit that more in the past, into like searching it out, and now more because like it's just there, whether you want it to be or not, and so like you can't help it. So you struggle. So yeah, we'll talk about that next week. Pornography. In the meantime, good night and God be with you.